The 40-Day Mirror, a journey through Jewish character. I'm Rabbi David Kadosh. Welcome to day 10. Yesterday we spoke about anava, true humility, which is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. Today we look directly at its opposite. Today we talk about gaava, arrogance, pride, the inflated sense of self that the Jewish tradition identifies as one of the most destructive forces in human character. I want to begin with a question that might be uncomfortable. Is there anyone listening to this who would describe themselves as arrogant? I'm going to guess almost nobody, because that is the singular genius of Gaava. It is almost entirely invisible to the person who has it. You don't wake up in the morning and think, I am an arrogant person. You wake up and think, I am a person who is usually right. Or, I am a person whose standards are simply higher than most. Or, I am a person who has worked hard and deserves recognition. Gaava is the only midah that comes with its own built-in justification system. The language the Torah uses about arrogance is startling in its severity. In Mishle, Shlomo HaMelech writes, To'avat Hashem kol geva lev. An arrogant heart is an abomination to Hashem. It's not a flaw, it's not a weakness, an abomination. The same word used for the most serious transgressions in the Torah. Why such strong language? The Vilna Gaon explains it this way. Every sin at its root is a moment where a person chooses himself over Hashem, his desire, his convenience, his ego, over the divine will. But those sins are momentary. A person sins, feels regrets, does teshuvah, and returns. Gaava is different. Gaava is not a moment, it's a posture. It's a constant low-level declaration that I am the center of things, that my judgment is the standard, that my honor matters most. It's not a single act of choosing yourself over Hashem, it's a permanent lifestyle of it. And that's why the language is so severe. Gaava doesn't produce sins, it produces a self that is structurally resistant to growth, to correction, to genuine relationship with others and with Hashem. The Gemara in Masechet Sotah records one of the most arresting statements in all of rabbinic literature. Hashem says, En ani vehu yecholin ladur ba'olam. I and the arrogant person cannot both dwell in the world. Now what does that mean? Hashem is everywhere. How can anything exclude him? Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin explains it this way. Hashem does not abandon the world because an arrogant person exists in it. Rather, the arrogant person creates within himself a space that Hashem cannot enter. Because Gaava, at its core, is the belief that there is no room above me, that I am already the final authority, that I have already arrived. And into a space that believes it is already full, nothing new can enter. No growth, no wisdom, no divine presence. The arrogant person is not rejected by Hashem. He has simply built a room with no door. But here's what I find most fascinating about Gaava and most practically useful for these 40 days. Baal Shem Tov taught that Gaava and Atzvut, arrogance and despondency, are secretly related. They are two expressions of the same root problem, an excessive preoccupation with the self. The arrogant person is crushed when he is not praised because his entire emotional architecture rests on the opinions of others. And the despondent person collapses inward for the very same reason. He is measuring himself against an image and finding himself lacking. Both the person puffed up with pride and the person deflated with self-criticism are doing the same thing. They are making themselves the center of the universe, just with different results. The antidote to both, says the Baal Shem Tov, is the same. Bitul, self-nullification. The liberating recognition that you are not the point, that the story is larger than you, that your value does not depend on your performance or other people's applause. There is a story of two great Torah scholars who were both known for their brilliance and humility. A student once asked of them, how do you maintain humility when everyone around you treats you with such honor? The scholar said, every morning I remind myself 3 things I don't know. 3 genuine gaps in my understanding. And I hold on to those gaps all day. Because as long as I know what I don't know, there's always room for something greater than me to enter. 3 things I do not know. That is the daily practice of keeping the door open. There's one more dimension worth noting. Gaava is particularly dangerous in spiritual contexts. What the tradition calls Gaava diktusha, spiritual arrogance. The person who learns a lot and quietly begins to look down on those and learn less. The person who is punctualist in mitzvot and develops a subtle contempt for those who are not. The person who has genuine accomplishments in Torah and Avodah and begins to feel just slightly that he has earned something. Yochanan ben Zakkai on his deathbed wept. His students asked him why. He said, I don't know which path they are taking me on. The greatest Torah sage of the generation, and he was on his deathbed, and he still didn't know. He was still open. He was still uncertain. He was still humble before the enormity of what he didn't know. If Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wasn't sure, what does that say about the rest of us? Here's today's question for the mirror. Where in my life do I carry a quiet sense of superiority over a family member, a colleague, someone in my community that I've never fully examined? Not the dramatic arrogance, the quiet kind. The barely there assumption that my way is simply better, my standards higher, my judgment more reliable. Find that place, hold these three things that you do not know, and leave the door open. This has been Day 10 of the 40-Day Mirror, a journey through Jewish character. Until tomorrow.